Welcome to the Relationship Mapping Workgroup hosted by Prospect Research Institute. This is a free and informal workgroup for prospect researchers interested in discussing and learning about new relationship mapping tools and techniques. I'm Jennifer Filla, your moderator, and I'm delighted to introduce our speaker for today, Brett Eaglstein. Brett is a senior account executive with Relationship Science, and he works exclusively with nonprofit clients, both cause-based organizations as well as universities. Brett was kind enough to fill in for Kim Ford, who unfortunately could not be here today. Without further delay, I'll turn it over to you, Brett.
Jen, thank you for the introduction. Overall, our vision is to redefine the culture of business development. We're a technology solutions company, and the whole idea behind relationship science is to allow organizations to fully leverage and utilize this concept of relationship capital. This slide shows you a snapshot of the type of companies and people we collect. As you can see, it's not just within business and finance, but nonprofits, private companies, law firms, LPs, the creative space, high net worth individuals, governments. We're really profiling all of the industries. We're not a social network, so we're not like a LinkedIn or a Facebook. We're not a CRM system, nor are we a tool that houses contact information, such as personal email addresses, as well as cell phone numbers. This is the RelSci Dashboard. It's a web-based application, and first thing you're going to do is you upload who you know, and this tells you who they can get you in front of. So right off the bat, we've had a client reach out to high net worth individuals. So whenever you pull up an individual profile, it shows you some basic profiling information on the type of data that we can aggregate on a given individual. What a lot of our clients like is the fact that we can collect previous nonprofit donations they have given. But the real value of the system is the mapping technology, which is why all of our clients, such as Duke University, find us useful. So, for example, when I click on this Pathfinder tool, what this is showing you how I, through my network of 141 people, can get in touch with Melody Hobson, who's a target of mine, right? So right off the bat, I know Carol Lavin-Burnick. Carol may have access to Melody through the Economic Club of Chicago, not because they're both members, but because they're both board members and first vice chairman at the organization. So not only do we highlight your top path, but we show you every single pathway that you have to get in front of your targets. If Carol does not have access to Melody, directly we show you other pathways through Carol that you can get in front of your target. Now, this whole concept of relationship capital, what this means that if the user does not have a direct pathway to their target, by clicking on this colleagues path, this is now where I'm accessing my firm's relationship capital. So everyone is sharing relationships. Kim and her colleagues share relationships. So here I can see that a colleague of mine, Evan Bruno, knows Anthony. Anthony may have access to Melody through the World Business Chicago, where Anthony is a director and Melody's a member of the board of directors. Some of our clients go after companies and foundations. So just to show you what that looks like when you go after a company. If you're targeting Coca-Cola, again, we have bioinformation on that organization, but to see all the paths, now this tool is showing you how you can map yourself to Coca-Cola, and this allows you to see that I have a total of 18 pathways to James, who's a member of the board of directors. If I want to go after the CEO exclusively, I can see that I have a total of 36 pathways to get to Mr. Kent, all through leveraging my own network. Now, the majority of our nonprofit clients actually use us to look for foundations that they should be targeting, as this is a recent trend that we found that a lot more of universities and cause-based organizations are targeting foundations. To show you how that works is we track 3 different types of foundations, so I'm just loading those up. And now to get to more specifically, I can look for foundations that have given to universities as well as higher education institutions. So when I click on search, I will get a list of all foundations that fit this criteria. And then what I can do from here is the Tiger Foundation has given to other universities and organizations that are similar to mine, so if I click on this organization, I can then map myself on how I get there, as well as see how my colleagues can get me there. In terms of creating highly targeted donor prospects, this donor search tool allows you to look for individuals that fit a specific donor criteria. And what one of our clients does, the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, is they will actually load up their organization, their public profile. They'll look for people in a certain location, so we'll do North Carolina. And what they'll do is they'll checkmark this exclude button. So what this is doing is looking for individuals who have given to other breast cancer research-oriented foundations but have yet to give to the BCRF that live in North Carolina. So if I'm working with a front-end developer who's covering North Carolina, that's my territory, I can see that there are 920 individuals that I should target. So from here, I can upload this a list, BCRF North Carolina targets, go back up to the Pathfinder tool, and see who I map with to figure out my shortest pathway. So I can go to Scott Ackerman, who's a family friend, who may know John through St. Vincent's Medical Center and ambulatory care. And then John lives in North Carolina that has given to other breast cancer research-oriented causes. Now, what we also do is we're a good link between prospect research and frontline developers. Frontline developers are constantly traveling, so by leveraging a tool such as Visit a City, if a frontline developer is going to LA to meet with a couple of prospective donors and they really want to make use of this trip, they can look for C-suite and senior executives within banking and finance. So if you're an East Coast institution, you don't have many contacts out in LA, I can quickly go to my extended network. So what this is doing is, out of our list of 1,100 individuals, there are 88 people that are one phone call away. Once again, you can save this as a list, LA extended. Go back up to Pathfinder, type in the name of this list, and see how you map those organizations. Now, one real main problem that our clients have used to solve with relationship science is this fact of board optimization. So I showed you before on Melody's profile how we show how she has access to a given amount of people. And what you can do is you can actually save those names to a list. And then from there, so if Melody is a board member of mine, I can load up everyone that she has access to. And from there, I can scan for people that live in North Carolina who have previously given to higher education and universities. Search. So out of her 3,500 people that she has access to, there are 8 people that she knows that live in North Carolina that have given to other universities. So from here, I can save this to a new list. I can call this Melody Hobson, North Carolina Friends. But just because we have this list, it may or may not be a good time to reach out to those contacts. So in order to help with idea generation of when's a good time to reach out to these people, I can actually load up that new list I created. And what this news feature allows you to do is you can track news on board changes, or you can track news on information that isn't necessarily quote-unquote your standard news. For example, insider transactions. So what this alerting feature allows you to do is look for people who have recently bought, but more importantly, sold stock in a given company. So out of Melody's 8 friends that live in North Carolina that have given to higher education and universities, 2 of them have recently sold large amounts of stock. Since they sold this stock, they now have an influx of cash. Maybe now is a really good time for me to go out or to have a frontline developer go out and reach these individuals. And then the last component that a lot of our clients have been using us, for example, Tulane University, is this RelSci services component. And this allows you to directly connect with our 500-person research team for various projects. For example, if you're looking at John Smith and we don't have his previous donation data, you can request, think of it as an on-demand request to have us profile John Smith more extensively. Or you can actually submit a list of all of your top targets, whether they're individuals, corporations, or foundations, and have them go profile them for you. That's pretty much the gist of the system in a nutshell. I'll now open the floor to any questions. Sure. So we collect this information. We're a research-driven tool. And what that means is we have a team of about 500 researchers who are going through publicly verifiable sources. So what that means is Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, any social network is not a valid source. Any database that's user content driven, we do not deem a valid source. Valid sources include Ks and Qs, news releases, press releases. We buy data from third parties such as FactSet, LexisNexis, NOSA, Prequent, GuideStar, iWave, Million Dollar Listing. Over 100,000 different sources we collect data from, and then the research team goes through that data, cleans it, curates it, purifies it, and then aggregates it to our system. In addition, our research team built robots, over 100,000 different robots that sit on top of major company websites, that all they're doing is simply refreshing the page. If a robot notices a change, whether it's people listed in the people page, people's bio information, or even the corporate structure hierarchy a robot will notify a researcher, and a researcher will go check it out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask a question. This is Jennifer. My question is this. So as I was watching you, solve common questions, we are looking for new individual prospects. We have to do prospect lists for TRIP, and, we always want to leverage our trustees. But what I saw was you looking at your own personal connections, and rarely is a prospect researcher going to be doing that. I'm always asked to look at the all the trustees, the board of directors. What relationships do they have? Can any of them help me get to Coca-Cola or that particular foundation? So how would we use it?
Great. So there's a couple ways that you can do it. First and foremost, which may be the easier, you can actually load up your public profile. So obviously, for using Tulane, for example, if you scroll down here, you can see all of the staff that we've collected information on, all the way from the president to some operating offices staff, as well as professors. And then you move down here, you can see all the directors, trustees, board members, presidents, councils we've collected on that university. So if I work for Tulane, I can actually use this information right here. I can load up Tulane University, and then I can type in my target. Also, if you notice from when I was giving talking about from my relationships is you'll notice that I had that colleague feature as well. So your colleagues could be people associated with your organization, executive director, president, a board member who's willing to donate their relationships, a donor who's willing to donate their relationships. So these people can also be part of your relationship web. And then finally, another way to do it is you can actually create lists of these people. So for example, I can create a list of all of my donors, right? And I can see how a list of my donors, board of directors, and trustees can get me to Melody.
So I have a question all the way from, I think it's the UK, and she's asking if there's coverage for international companies and prospects, and then curious about the cost for those on-demand requests that you showed last, where we would ask you to research a company or an individual.
Great. So we are a global database. We're about 65% U.S. and Canada, and the rest is global. In terms of the U.K., we have very good coverage in the U.K. We profile all publicly traded companies globally, private companies, etc. So we do have a nice set of international data. In terms of the RelSci services requests, all of those on-demand capabilities come with the system. They are at no additional cost.
So can you give us an example of a UK company?
Sure. So this is Vodafone. Think of it as the Sprint or Verizon of the UK. Now, once off the bat, this whole system is about relationship mapping and pathing. So the first two modules you'll see is how I can get there through my network, or I can leverage my colleague's network. So I can see that one of my colleagues, Bill Oken, knows Arun. Arun used to be the CEO of Vodafone. So you have some basic profile information, current and past employees, current and past board of directors, some financial information, recent transactions they've done, advisors on those transactions, people associated with the firm, corporate hierarchy, investments, etc. Now to show you, now this individual is the CEO of Vodafone, and we're saying that he has access to over 2,000 other people we profile in the database, and to show you some of the international coverage, where they went to school, memberships they're a part of, corporate boards, nonprofit boards, public holdings, transactions, how much money they make, and events that they've spoken at.
I have a couple questions. This is Dave. As you're looking through, for example, Vittorio's information, is there a way to find the reference, like the original source material there?
That's a great question. Yes. So via the RelSci services button, so for example, if you wanted to know where we got that he's a member of the India UK CEO Forum, you would click on this RelSci services, and the system has a way of tracking of what page you're on, so we know. And then you can say, hey, RelSci, can you please give me the source of where you found out that he was part of the India UK CEO network? Since we're not creating content, we're not creating data, we're actually just aggregating data, we have no problem showing you where we got that information.
How long does that take? Like if somebody came in and said, hey, you said this person was from this, show me the original source. I mean, is it like 10-minute kind of turnaround, or is it a day? Is it 2 days?
So a simple request like this, 24 hours for sure. I mean, that's even very targeted. It'd take a person a few minutes, so that would just depend on volume at that given moment. But certainly a request this simple, 24 hours.
I would think that if somebody were asking me about original sources, I'd probably want everything. So, for example, say, well, how do you know he's a member of India, UK? And then they come back the next day and say, oh, it was here. And they say, oh, how do you know he's this? I could see a long list of questions like that. So is there, what would it be the same 24-hour turnaround if I said, give me every source that you have on this guy?
Sure. I mean, it may go out to 48 hours at that point. For example, if you're looking at this individual and you want all the sources where we got this data, that may take some time. But a researcher will get back with you. If it's going to take longer than 24 hours, a researcher will get back to you and will give you an approximate ETA of when they think to have this done.
Thanks. That's good to know. How many records do you have?
So it's 3 million people over 1 million organizations, and it's constantly growing.
And I noticed that you have to, in the examples that you showed, you had a target. Is there a way to do something like, somebody comes in and says, hey, John Smith on our board, who does he know? Where I'm not
Sure.
trying to get to anybody, just who does he know? Like, how would you do that?
So what I can do, just showing you Melody, keeping consistently, if you scroll down here and you go to Relationship Summary, this is where our research team has determined that Melody, through her employment history, network she's a part on, board she sits on, that she has access to exactly 3,590 people. And what you can do is you can scroll down this list and see everyone that she has access to. You can export this in a PDF report or an Excel file as well.
Okay, and I guess it's sorted by, I was noticing that the sorting was done by relationship strength.
Exactly. So we'll put the strongest relationships at the top and then sort down and then sort downwards from there. If you remember when I was showing you the Pathfinder tool, you saw those different colors, red, orange, and yellow. Those are indications of the relationship likelihood metric. So what this algorithm is looking at, it's looking at two people's overlap when it comes to board history. Are they part of a 100-person corporate board or a 10-person nonprofit? So that's easy to determine. If they're part of a 10-person board, level of access is higher than if they're part of a 100-person board. But the system's more sophisticated in that. It also looks at the board's agenda, corporate versus nonprofit. So if you're part of a nonprofit, you're volunteering your time, you're attending a lot of social functions together, and you're passionate about that cause. So it's a little bit higher than a corporate board involvement. Employee history, networks and clubs and affiliations that people care about, previous donation data, how many of these different connection points do two individuals share, what time frame did all of these occur. The system aggregates that and then is able to apply a mathematical relationship likelihood rating.
What can you apply filters to this list? So who does she know that, and then use some of those other great filters that you had, like the gifts to certain types of organizations and things like that? Or is it kind of just a master list that has the strongest to weakest connections for those 3,590 relationships?
No, you can search within this list. So if you remember, I went to Power Search and I pulled up this list, called it Melody's Friends. So now, instead of scanning the database out of 3 million people, I'm looking at the 3,500 that Melody knows. So I can see who lives in North Carolina that's given to...
That's right. I'm sorry. You did do that through another screen. I was thinking it something else. But, we also, in this group particularly, we had the other, what I would probably identify as serious player in the relationship mapping space, Prospect Visual, come and share with us as well. And I'm always curious to hear how kind of vendors see the others.
In terms of other competitors out there in the space, and from what we've heard, Prospect Visual, as you can imagine, is probably our leading competitor when it comes to this pathing technology. But from what I've heard, and we've had clients such as Tulane move from Prospect Visual to us, as well as other organizations, is that we lay out the paths in a much cleaner way. In addition, we're a curated database. So we take pride in the amount of research our 500-person research team does before we post a new profile. All the different pieces of information. So when you're acting upon this information, when you're calling Bill Oken, who happens to be a donor of yours, and asking him to introduce you to James, the information you're using on how you know that Bill knows James is up to date, honest, and factual. And then finally, we're profiling a different community. I'll be the first one to tell you that Prospect Visual has a lot more data than us. They profile a lot more people. But we're profiling a very select group of people. We try to find out who's influential at those organizations, and that's who we determine to profile. So, for example, if you look at a publicly traded company, who we think is influential is anyone who's SVP or higher. Mm-hmm. For our private companies, if they're venture backed, we try to go the same level. We'll probably even dip down to VP level. If you look at a law firm, it's a completely different industry and setup. So people who are influential at law firms are senior partners, managing partners, as well as their assistants or secretaries, because they're gatekeepers into the organization. If you look at a nonprofit, private equity firm, or even hedge fund, a lot of these times people wear many hats, they're understaffed, so therefore people have a lot more responsibility, and because of that, we'll go down to the first-year analyst, first-year associate, first-year employee at that organization, because they are very influential in the direction that firm goes. And then finally, you have the wealth X's and the wealth engines out there in the world. Those are great. They'll go in a lot more detail than we do, such as how much their second home is worth or what prep school their kids go to. But they're just a screening tool. So after you get that list, the issue then becomes, how do I map to these 80 high-profile targets? And that's where you use a service like RelSci, because through this list functionality, you can actually upload your own list that you get from other products, such as WealthX or Wealth Engine, and then you can see how your organization can map to those targets.
So I have a question from the field for you that kind of follows right on what you were saying. Again, in the UK, we're looking for, one, the question is, how often is the information being, refreshed and updated? And then two, what kind of coverage of nonprofits do you have in the UK?
Sure. So in terms of data refreshing, it's constantly. It's every second via whether it's over the 100,000 different robots we have that are refreshing a website's people page or organizational structure page. In addition, our research team is divided into different groups, and they have different procedures in place on updating the information. And if you couple that with people sending in RelSci services research requests, the system's constantly being updated. And then in terms of the geographic sector of nonprofits, I actually do not know that off the top of my head, but I do have a stat sheet that was taken back around November, December of 2013, and I'll be more than happy to send that out to everyone.
Hey, Brett, I just thought of one more difference, too, and that is some of those wealth events that you track, basically if there's a sale of stock or something. I know that I've not seen a relationship mapping interface tool product have a timing feature. So you could know that William Oken knows James D. Robinson. That's great, but when is the right time to approach? So just as that was another observation I had.
Oh, great! Thank you for that, Dave.
One of the things that came up in the chat, the news alerts and the giving history. You mentioned NOSA as a source for that. Are those two features new to relationship science?
Yes. So the giving history, as in, looking at Melody's previous nonprofit donations, that's been there.
Okay.
But this 360 alerts is our newest feature, and these are just the type of alert topics that you can get alerted on. So, for example, use case scenario, one of my very first clients is a life insurance salesman, and he set alerts on all of his relationships as well as his targets. He got an alert saying that one of the guys that he knows years ago, I'd say 15 plus years ago, when he first started out in the business, he sold a product to, and they haven't touched base since, was actually appointed chairman of a board. He sent an email to that individual, hey, congratulations on the move, just wanted to, send that your way. A week later, they ended up doing another deal. Granted, that's outside the nonprofit space, but it speaks to the type of information, the useful information that we provide when it comes to our news service.
In our field, many of us, there's different products that offer us alerts, but many of us use Google Alerts, and they haven't serviced their alerts as well as they have in the past.
You bring up another point, that since we are a curated database, when you tag that you want information on John Smith that works at Goldman Sachs, our system is sophisticated to understand that you only want information on that John Smith that works at Goldman Sachs. There may be 100 other John Smiths there, but you want information on the one that you know. So when you're getting these different news alerts, different than Google News, who is going to bring in every information on John Smith who works at Goldman Sachs, you're only going to get information on the one that you care about.
I have another question coming in from the chat box. We're currently users of relationship science and are looking for ways to best capitalize on the product. And this really, Brett, is why we love having the practitioner in here, because they speak our language. So she's curious how other users, especially medical institutions, have used your product with the Grateful Patient programs, especially around HIPAA issues, things like that. I don't know if you can speak to that or not.
Since I do work in a healthcare organization, and we do have Grateful Patient stuff all over the place. Incidentally, the HIPAA law has changed that we do have access now in the United States to physician names and general area of treatment, which is huge. But the question, I think, is also spanning other fields, which is, if I have a list, what information do you need, what fields are mandatory in order to match them? Because you mentioned, okay, I know John Smith was a patient, let's say. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to have his address and date of birth. That's pretty much it. I don't even know if I have date of birth. I just have the address, okay? How are you going to match that to a John Smith at Goldman Sachs, for example, and know it's the right one? So it's a question of, when you're receiving lists from your clients, what fields do you need to have? Because we don't have access, for example, to employer.
Okay, so when you upload a list, you can upload any information that you have on an individual. In terms of just a general rule of thumb when it comes to uploading, we recommend that you obviously have first name, last name, email address, and company name. That being said, if you have location, that helps, because if you upload John Smith and it, Jacksonville, Florida, we'll look for John Smiths that work or sit on boards within Jacksonville, Florida. So whenever you're uploading a list, I guess it's a good time to talk about this as well. Those names are going to go into one of three buckets. The first bucket is a confirm match. So the John Smith you're uploading is the John Smith that we have. And then you have the second bucket, which is possible matches, where if you're looking at Jane Doe, here are two other Jane Does that we have in our system, and you manually have to go in there and say, oh, it's the first Jane Doe, not the second one. And then the third bucket is then just this community of no matches. For example, kid's babysitter, dog walker, what have you. People who you have in your Rolodexes that are not part of our world. So whenever you upload that list, your names will go into one of those three different buckets.
And I have two more questions come over the chat line. One of the questions was, do you offer free trials? And the other question was curiosity about the due diligence feature. Maybe, I see it on the menu on the right.
Sure. So we do offer free trials. Trials last about 1 week, 7 days, as this will give you enough time to go through that matching process to see who you know out of our network, and then go through some different case studies, some different test runs to see if who you know can get you in front of your target. So yes, we do offer free trials. And in the due diligence tab, this was a feature that was created for our hedge fund community, but some of our nonprofits have used this as well. So if you're going to form a relationship, if you're the Doe Fund and you want to form a relationship with the Home Depot, right, because you're going to build some houses for the homeless, right, you can actually see this will allow you to do better research on that organization. So all you do is you type in the Home Depot. And what this allows you to do is search for prior executives, current board members, and let's do some private equity stakeholders of the company. And I can also speak with current executives of competitors as well as current clients of these competitors. So why are you doing this? You're doing this because you want to speak to people that have one-on-one knowledge with company morale, what's going on within the company, where the company is going. Is this a company that you want your nonprofit to align with in a very public setting? So then you can scan on these lists. So if I want to speak to Bernard Marcus, I can speak to him about, what's really going on with Home Depot internally. Information that's outside of SEC filings, Ks and Qs, etc.
I actually have a question. This is Kate. How helpful would this be for a very small nonprofit? We would want to use it to know who in our small network of our board members and our staff and our people close to us, if they are connected with any powerful people. But we ourselves are not necessarily powerful people and potentially don't even have profiles, that would be in this database. It's 3 million people, and I just don't know how many people that would cover. I don't think I would have one of these profiles, so then it wouldn't necessarily be helpful if, we are not important enough people.
Sure. So your board's going to be publicly profiled. In addition, your board members could have one of those licenses where they're actually uploading their personal contacts, because you have two different types of profile, right? You have the personal profile, which is all of my personal LinkedIn connections, Outlook contacts, etc. And then you have my public profile, where the RelSci research team has determined that Brett Eaglstein has access to, let's say, 200 people, right? So you have those two capabilities as well. But to put this in perspective, being that you said you're a small organization, one of our early clients, the Futures Project, it's a nonprofit startup. So being that it's a nonprofit startup, their board was pretty small, on the rise individuals. They had no alumni network, very small current donor network. Within 6 months, they were able to raise over $100,000 in new donor acquisitions. And there's actually a case study that we did on Interfaith Youth Corps that had a similar issue to what you're speaking about. It's a smaller organization, about 32 employees, I think. And one of their big use cases for us was fully leveraging their board. So what I can do is I can send that information to Jen, and then you can forward it off to the team.
You're awesome, Brett. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.